Hi folks, I'm International Master John Watson and this is Ask the Master on ICC TV. The main idea of this show is to provide players with a forum to ask questions about chess and the chess world. You can send these questions in advance, or if you're tuning in live on the YouTube ICC, you can participate in the chat. That's on the right side of your screen and ask me questions right now. I'll generally give priority to questions I've received beforehand, which has the advantage that they can be made more precise and you can provide me with actual questions and concrete moves. But I think it's fun to kind of glance over at the chat once in a while and see what you're saying to each other and to me, and I'll definitely try to respond to anything you say there. Sometimes there's a little delay because I've got two screens. One is on the other desk, so I'm not always looking that way. Okay, there are three ways to submit questions in advance. Anytime during the week. It's best to submit them up to the day before the show, but I'll still be checking on the morning of the show. The first and best way to do it is to send questions to my email address, askimwatson@chessclub.com. Let me spell that, ASKIMWATSON @chessclub.com. Chessclub.com is the ICC URL, which I'll get to these questions right away if you send them there. We also have a Twitter channel, hashtag AskIamWatson, that isn't being used very much, but I'll try to check it once in a while. Anytime you feel like it, you can send a tweet there. And the other pretty good way is to send a message to John L. Watson, which is my ICC handle. So if you are an ICC member and you're on ICC, you go message space JOHNLWATSON, that's one word, which is another way to reach me. The alternative is to ask a question live right now during the show, as I say, which you can do on the page at the right. You can ask anything related to chess. I have some expertise in openings since I've played, taught, or written about them over all these years. I also have many, many students, so I teach chess endgame strategy, and I think chess history is a lot of fun, and of course chess books and videos since I've written reviews for 30 years or so. And I've written books, so I know something about chess books. Or of course ask anything else. So let's get started. I'll try to cover both old questions we didn't get to and some new ones. So let me just move into the first one. I have a hi man, a message, and hi back to you. Let me start out a lot of things from last show. I got a couple of questions about the Sicilian defense, and I realized we haven't talked much about the Sicilian. I think we have too many French defense questions. Let me just check my picture for a second here. Yeah, it's looking pretty good here. Okay. Let me, okay, the first question, they're both about variations that are not seen very often. The first question, has anybody asked you about the Loewenthal variation, which is, and let me put this up. I think that's the best way to do this. Let me put this up here. Let me put a board up so I can show you a game with this. Did that work? No, that doesn't seem to have worked. Why? Excuse me. That is not coming up. Give me 1 second. Let me get another window up. And have all these games ready here. No, that's not working. Well, this is very strange. I'm on the command line, and it doesn't seem to be working. Let me, well, I guess I can do it by hand. I guess that's better than nothing. Oh, and that moved, too. Have to give me a second here to organize. I think I'm going to take a quick pause here. Can I pause that broadcast for a second? Is there a way to pause this broadcast for just a second? Can I do that? Can I pause this for a second? How do I do that? Stop it completely? On Internet Chess Club. I'm broadcasting. Yeah, but I wait 30 seconds, right? Hello. Okay, it looks like we're back. And very sorry about that. Something went wrong in terms of the broadcast. I believe it was actually my fault, so I'm not going to blame my ICC cohorts here. This is actually Karyakan Nakamura, so it's completely the wrong game. And that's not good. It looks like I'm going to have to manually do this. This is unbelievable. This is from, let me just make sure that this is not somehow accidentally the correct game. No, it's not. Okay. Okay, I'm going to take over manually here, and I'll try to simplify what I wrote down here. The first question was about the Loewenthal of the Sicilian. My apologies, folks. Thanks for sticking around. Some of you seem to have stuck around. Glitch, yeah, major glitch. The Loewenthal Sicilian is a little odd. It starts out like a Sveshnikov, and you're used to the move d6 here, maybe. But it's an old-fashioned line that they played constantly. There are thousands of games of this, actually, partly because it was played in the 19th century here. And what's the idea here? The idea here is that, okay, there's going to be weaknesses along the d file here for black, d6 and d5 in particular, but black's going to have a big lead in development if he plays queen takes f6, for example. Let's look at that first. It's one of the best moves. In fact, let me just mention some of the moves generally. I'm not even going to show you the analysis, partly because we're way behind now. But one of the moves is this, and over the years that's kind of been solved. Black gets a quick counterattack in this way. And he's ahead in development that makes up for some of these weaknesses. Another move is this move, a little bit abstract, but not a bad move. And black can try to play a quick d5 with the idea of here and then here. It's very complicated, but it's not a very popular move. I'm just going to stick to the main lines here. There are two moves. This is not a horrible line for black. It's still played, still playing correspondence, but it still is considered better for white. There are two lines that I think, I did some research, I think basically white is better in two different ways. This one is very minor, though. There's only one really good move, and I don't think this is really it. Now the e-pawn is already attacked, so white's going to defend that. And then black has a couple different moves here. d5 is the famous move. And just to show you white's ideas, how white might win this kind of position, although it's not that easy. White can defend this, and the best way to defend that is just this. White is a pawn ahead. That's the idea. So after black takes this, and black tries to get his pawn back, with that move, white will give back the pawn, and then either double immediately or play rook here. And there's a pretty well-known game. I think actually black maybe should play bishop g6. It may not matter. That's not a bad move. That was played in the game. And white played this move knight e4 here. I actually think the best move is this. And if he takes, you're going to start cleaning up all these pawns along the file. But if not, this is becoming a huge threat. So possibly you should take my word for that, or write it down, or capture it and think about it later. That's a good line. So basically, I think the best way to play this instead is knight b4 first, threatening knight takes c2, and thinking about d5. So that's the best way for black to play this. I'm trying to show both sides how to play this, how white, if black was interested, how he might get away with trying to do this. Now if white plays this move, black plays here, and gets fairly quick pressure here. Maybe white's a little better, but it's not so easy. White might have to waste a move playing a3, and then black gets this move d5 in more quickly. Sure, white might have a tiny edge, but it's not worth much. Okay, I could show you some lines there, but it's really not worth it. So what Kaufman, this is what he recommends in his book for white, the white openings according to Anand. He says this is a good line, but you have to play here, this kind of artificial looking move. And he does tons of analysis, but I think the best answer is very modest. Forget all this d5 stuff. Just go here. Play really solidly. After all, this is a pretty good bishop. You're ahead in development. Let me just show you how that goes. Now, Kaufman gives this line for white, and the king comes back with the idea of putting the bishop either here or here, playing rook d1, maybe playing bishop c4, really controlling the d5 square. But you're behind in development. And I find that black stands very solidly here, and let me show you why that is. After this move, which is his favorite move, and there are reasons for that, black can play various moves. He gives d5 and knight e7, and neither one of those is very good. There are two good moves here. King e7 is a pretty good move, but I think the best move is this. Just stop bishop g5. And this is a standard structure that Ulf Andersson and also, well, Cyrus Lakdawala, a friend of mine, have played quite a bit. And I think they've sort of proven this is okay as long as you have a little lead in development, which you do here. So after white plays here, which was the whole idea, either that or bishop g5, black plays here and has control over that square. You can put a piece there. King e7 is also okay. And then you can bring a rook over. Just for example, something like this. And because of the control of c4 and putting a piece there, white really doesn't have any, and good control over d5. White has no real advantage here. It's your standard backward pawn in the Sicilian. It's always defensible, and after all, you get that pawn in all kinds of open Sicilians. All right, so that's the basic idea. So I think better for white, although white probably does have a little advantage if he plays accurately here. Maybe king d2 wasn't so great after all. Certainly is counterintuitive. So let's go back and let me show you. Yeah, I don't have the game here. I'll show you what happens in this game, although I probably won't be too thorough about it. Okay, so it's queen here. Queen d1, oddly enough, is a strong move. And it's a little hard to describe that, but it keeps the bishop open. It just says, I have control over the square. I have plenty of time. And black plays several moves here, but the main one is queen here, attacking this with check. White defends that, and black plays here. And black is thinking about d5, because after d5, if white takes it, black has either knight here or knight here, attacking the c2 square. And notice the bishop can't move out because of queen takes g2. So that's sort of the theory here. And what white does is a very good move, but he has to know it. And that's why this is kind of fun to play maybe for black. How many people know these lines? It's the only reasonable move, really. Black simply stops. He advanced that pawn, and I won't show you what happens, but it's not a good idea to let that advance. And now white plays bishop here. Again, the only really serious move, because it threatens to take sometimes. And otherwise, black just plays d5 and knight b4. Well, he tries it anyway. This is a game between Efemenko, 2600 player plus, and Vallejo Pons, who has actually been a 2700 player. And this is a very common line, and I can show you a lot of variations after this. Black is almost okay, practically equal. White should probably take this. And then black takes back, and white goes here to stop that knight c2 and get developed. And something like this. And now if white takes this pawn, black takes this pawn, white castles and gets a big attack. So this kind of thing happens. And basically, if black plays accurately here, he's almost equal. King d6 is a move. Another move is just the main move, is probably just this. The idea is to go attack this pawn, take it, and have an equal game. For example, if he castles, you play b4 first, and then rook d8. And even though he has this d6 check move, that pawn's going to fall pretty soon. Black's got pretty active play. The king's even slightly exposed. So you have to look at that. White's actually a tiny bit better there. You could play this as white, but it's not worth much. You're certainly not going to win if black plays well. The other move, just to show you quickly here, is to play knight d4 for black. So these are reasons why playing black can be kind of fun. White plays here to defend against knight c2 check. Black plays out to get another piece out quickly. White takes. Black can take either way as it turns out. In this game he plays this way. And white plays here. Now these are almost 2700 players, so these are people who know what they're doing. White wants to get castled queenside. And black makes this nice little move here. Covering a lot of squares, maybe swinging over to the queenside in conjunction with this attack. And stopping white from castling, which is the main first idea. And there's various moves here. If knight e4, black just plays rook d8. Rook d8 is the main idea. So in this game he plays g3, and black takes, plays back over here with a threat, And white defends against that threat on d5. Black simply castles. White plays castles. Black brings the knight into d4, where it's going to have extra pressure. White is a pawn ahead, by the way, so there's no way black's going to be better here. But it turns out black is pretty equal here. If white takes this, then that secures square, that square, and it also threatens this square. And there's also ideas of just b5 and maybe a5 if needed. That's equal. And white played here, very natural, stopping, covering f3. But now he could have played just there. That was the best move. And something like this happens, and black's just fine. If you look at that for a while, you'll see the knight can't move without losing this at some point, or weakening that. This is attacked right now. And I won't go into any detail, but black's got a really nice position on the king side also. So it's worth a pawn. All right, thanks very much. Sorry I couldn't show you the game itself. That's because I can't seem to bring it up. Now the next game I think should be okay, but I'm not sure. The next question is very interesting. Let me first see if I'm able to actually enter the game. I don't know why this is not particularly working. Just to see if this works. Ah, there we go. So from now on, I'll be able to show you games and answer questions. The next question was also about the Sicilian. Very interesting question, because someone like Peter Svidder, a bunch of top GMs were playing this briefly as black. The idea is this crazy move. A lot of you have seen the dragon, the accelerated fianchetto, and the classical line with knight in here, these kinds of things. The time it off with e6 and queen c7, the con, well, variation of the Paulson with a6 and e6. Plenty of things to do here, but this move was played in the 19th century and now has recently been played again, or fairly recently played again. And the question is, what should white do about this? So I'm not going to emphasize black's ideas here. One obvious idea is that after that, black's got nice free movement for his pieces. He stopped the bishop from moving because of this. He's attacking the knight. That's got to be okay. So that's the first idea. And then white has two moves I think might give him a small advantage here after d5. Let me see. The one in this game is just pinning, certainly logical. I think white has another move that doesn't seem very logical at all, but seems to give him a small advantage, which is here and then here. And the problem is that black can't recapture with the pawn because of check. And then this pawn falls. And there's no trick like check attacking pieces because the knight protects everything. So white wins a pawn for nothing, and it's a center pawn, which is nice because otherwise black has a huge center. So black has to take this way, and there are a couple of ways of playing this, but I think the best is just don't have your king move. Just play here attacking the queen. The queen can't lose any more time, especially because he has weaknesses. So this happens, and white's not compelled to castle. Now black has a weakness. Both sides have a bishop pair. There's really no compensation for the weakness. Of course, it's very small, but let me show you a real quick example. This is played in almost every game. Now, I think white might play g3 here, but white in several games has played that move instead. Black plays this. I don't think that's ideal, and you'll see why. White's slightly better no matter what here. White attacks that. Black tries to get rid of white's bishop, and white just plays here. And this position is simply better for white. It's a positional advantage, and was won in a game between a 24, almost 2500 and a 2350. So, and in correspondence, which is a good sign. By the way, all these lines, I looked up correspondence because that'll tell you what's going, why they aren't played much anymore, and what the safe and main lines are for white. So if you're on the white side of this, this is a good way to play it. And let me show you how this game actually went. Let me revert here. The game actually went. Okay, bishop e5 was the move instead of my little knight takes e6 and takes. The thing I showed you last. That's an interesting move. It seems to threaten to take twice. And black's whole idea in the system with d5, and the reason it got revived is this move, which turned out to look very good in many lines. Now it looks like black's lost a piece because if black takes it, he wins a piece. But this is a very standard line. It's worth knowing. This trick is very well known to play here. The idea is that after the bishop retreats, maintaining the fact that black simply can't take that, you pin the knight and you get your piece back. And that's the standard thing to do. Let me show you why that is, why white would play that way. If white does a discovered check, like black plays here. If white does a discovered check, then black actually does very well here by checking and then just playing here. And that's actually better for black. So it's kind of a cute little line. You can get the better game pretty easily. That was because you were ahead in development and he was totally tied up. So what white does instead of that is goes ahead and plays into this line with bishop back. I'm going to get to the chat by the way really quickly. Because of our rotten start, which is my fault, I'm going to go finish this first, and then I'll run back and get some questions. All right, so the knight is pinned now. This is all good to know if you want to play either side of this. It'd be great blitz weapon. It might even be a pretty good over-the-board weapon, actually. You get these tiny disadvantages. This one isn't very good for black because he's kept his bad bishop and there's pressure still on that square. This bishop's very nice, and the knight is blockading that square, so if black does something like this, white can go here. Now that square can be occupied. That's a good thing because the bishop's so bad. But black can get away with not standing much worse at all if he simply plays here. Nevertheless, overall, white's better in these lines here anyway because of that control of the square and this weakness. And black doesn't even have, if black had a bishop pair, you might say, okay, this is okay to have a weakness like this. Two weaknesses, really. But, and it is okay, it's not that bad, but you have to struggle to equalize here. If e5, just rook e1 turns out to be kind of awkward. King can always march over here if it needs to. And so in the game, black played e6, but look at those dark square weaknesses, especially this c5. White's just going to play to rook on the open file, maybe a couple rooks and then double and have a small advantage. So let's see that happening. Okay, so black tries to change the pawn structure. It's hard to see what else to do. How else is he going to get his pieces out? This bishop has no really good square. And this is a good idea it's a good practical idea. Double pawns aren't that bad, are they? They're capturing towards the center. But white does get another tempo to bring the rook to the center. And pretty soon he has a big advantage because of black's pawn structure. Even this turns out to be weak. I mean, you might say, of course it's weak, but often it's hard to get to that pawn. Let me just show you what happens here. I'm not going to go into any tactics here. There are a few tactics, but now the c-pawn's attacked. And now the idea is that's a threat, winning this pawn, but also that's an idea. It's kind of a cute little game. Black has defended well, by the way. Now he centralizes his king. Now there's ideas of doubling here, which I think he does, actually. Yes, now that has to be defended, so the king comes up. Now the rook pawn has to be defended. See, this is what you do with weaknesses. You just make slow progress. That's a good move. I think even better was to double first and then do that. Small point. Very small point. Or actually, even rook here really ties him down. Here's a Rubinstein-like move, this move. You may recognize that. Just stopping that from moving and exerting pressure this way. White's a lot better here. Almost winning. Instead he plays here, maybe not quite as accurate, but it leads to something really cute. Plays here. I don't know if you see what that's doing. It's not easy to see right away. But black makes a small mistake here. Does anybody see it? That's actually checkmate now. That pawn did a good job. In fact, black had to play something to escape here, like this move. So he'd have c6, but that makes that a worse bishop and weakens this pawn. So white could simply come back again, or it turns out maybe even better. And if you've seen things like this, maybe here, attacking this, and then he has this move, blockading that pawn and attacking here. This is a winning endgame, but it takes a lot of work, but it's a winning endgame. So it's an instructive little game, and sorry to do all of that, but I wanted to answer at least those first two questions. Wow, some people still there. Now that is loyalty. Thank you, everybody, for staying here. Let's go to the chat a little bit. Do you recommend f4 against the modern defense, or what do you think gives the best winning chances for white? Let's take a little quick look there. We've got a request for more volume. Let me just move the microphone a little. That might help. And I'll try and talk a little louder. There are ways to set volume, but since I already went off trying to do other things unsuccessfully, we'll try this first. Okay, so the question is the modern defense. Great question. We haven't talked much about the modern defense, if at all. Well, we talked about the monkey's bum variation. I don't know if anybody remembers that. This is called the modern defense. It can start with d4 also, obviously. And I like to play into these things, but of course you have to be willing to play against a King's Indian kind of position, maybe even the King's Indian directly. I think actually that's why I gave up the modern myself. I got sick of playing against c4. I just never found a really good line against c4. But the main line by far is this move. And black usually plays here. And now white has a whole bunch of choices. The question is, what do you think about f4? I used to love playing against f4 because I would actually play crazy lines with this and bishop g4. I won a whole bunch of games. This is a long time ago, though. I think things have probably changed. And then this move. And in my book, my white repertoire book with 1d4, I go into quite a bit of detail about this and show that I think white is actually better in these lines, in the main lines here. So things have changed now, and black tends to play things like a6 in this position. And then I think a pretty good line is just to play very solidly. Play here. Don't let yourself get pinned yet. And then you can play, well, you could play knight f3 immediately, or you can play things with bishop here. And the idea is to play e5 and bishop e4. Some people think you're slightly better here. Black's idea is to play knight d7 and bishop b7, but usually knight d7 first. It depends on the move order, and then c5. And white's going to counter that with this kind of thing, unless otherwise black actually gets the better game. This pawn move is not very dangerous, although it's some lines it's played. I'm not that excited about all this. I wonder if white can't just play more conservatively here. A very popular line is just to play here. And there are two ways to do this. Now, usually now he does play c6. He can play there. There are two ways to set up here that are interesting. f3, and then queen here. And then if black wants to play for b4, the knight comes back here and can swing over here. One of white's ideas is also to just go here and exchange that bishop the minute the knight moves. And if not, roll the pawns forward is a plan. Or just get developed and assume that because you have the bigger center, you stand better, which is in fact usually true. I'm not, f4 you have to study a lot and think what you're doing. I would get, you can get Tiger Hillart Person's book on the a6 systems. It's called Tiger's Modern. There's 2 editions. I'd get the new one. If you want to play f4 especially. Then if you want to play f4 here, then I would very seriously take a look at what he says about that. Lots of very sharp analysis. So I'd say if you want to study it a lot, maybe f4 is okay, but if not, just play something simple. I like this line. Now it turns out a lot of people like not playing f3, just playing here first, and maybe going back to knight f3, maybe playing h3, this kind of position. So I wish I could go into more detail here. There's so many lines you can play against this. And some people, by the way, just play a3. Just stop the move b4. And the idea is you can maybe run black out of moves a little bit. I should have mentioned this idea of playing castles, queens side, and if ever c5, then you can take it and win a pawn. So it stops the c5 idea. Maybe next week I'll take a look and give you a little more systematic answer to this. I have students who play it several different ways. This, by the way, is called the 150 attack. Not so much with a3, but it's called the 150 attack because what you do is you just simply play like a dragon and start attacking on the king side. That's the idea. All right, that's also against the Peerts, by the way, that you play that way. You'll notice black, by not playing knight f6, has not allowed you to play bishop h6 yet, and that can be a little bit awkward. So I'll try and do a little better next week. Maybe give you a little more detail about that, like a very specific move order for you. But f4 is risky. Let me at least put it this way. Tiger Hill person won a lot of quick games against f4 because it exposes white's center. So you need to know what you're doing specifically. And I might even look up a little more about that. But I do remember this bishop e3 idea followed by e5. You might wonder, why do I waste bishop e3 in those f4 lines? But it turns out it's actually quite useful. All right. Let's look at the chat. You guys deserve it. Before I get to any more questions, I wouldn't mind some more volume. I hope you got some more volume. That did help, someone said. That's good. And I'll try to talk louder. Do you get the impression that Nakamura is a bit psychologically overwhelmed for the candidates and has been pressing too much? I asked last week, but I don't think you answered. That's because it's, for me to do the answer to the prepared questions, I actually turn my face away from the chat, so sometimes I don't look at it too quickly, but thanks. Just be a little patient. I'll try to get to as many as possible. If there's a lot of chat questions, of course, it's hard, but luckily this time there aren't a whole bunch, so I'll get to you. Overwhelmed's a pretty good point. It's so hard. Whoever's at the bottom, you're bound to sort of think that, that they care too much. Sometimes you just don't get the right positions. I think against Caruana that happened. Of course, it was after his losses. He made the one big blunder. Of course he's nervous, but I think they're all nervous. Yeah, I think he's prepared, and it is his first candidates, and I think he had very ambitious. Nakamura was a favorite, according to several people, not just me. Now, favorite just meant 3% more likely to win than some of the other guys, but he was certainly one of the top 2 or 3 because his tournament chess has been so good. He's young. He's on a roll. It's true his rating slipped just slightly recently, but I think it was in a tournament he won. So something went wrong. But you can't always find explanations because someone has to be on towards the bottom. There's always a little bit of luck. His openings went poorly. They didn't really go that badly, but he wasn't used to them. They were a little difficult to play. They weren't his favorite kinds of positions. So maybe he was a little overplayed in the opening, even though he would get equal games at some point. As black against, was it Karyakin, he got that. Where he made the blunder, he was also a little short of time. He's not used to being short of time and having a little bit of a negative position. The Fiddler thing was totally preparation, actually, now that I think about it. That was so tough. And he did survive that game, but he was worse all game long. He hasn't been better enough in any game to really win. Even the game he did win against Topalov, I think it was, he didn't necessarily really deserve to. So a great question. Definitely, I'm sure he's overwhelmed. On the other point, the minute you lose, you make a blunder. And of course, there's the Jadub incident where, again, he was in time trouble. He could have drawn that ending, I believe. He's very good at endings like that. He's very good at fighting and defending, just like all these guys are, but especially people like Karyakin, Anand, and himself. Aronian, I should say, rather than Anand. Those are great defenders. And he touched his king, and it was so depressing. And of course, then he did something very bad, which is he said Jadub when he knew darn well that he touched the queen. But these things happen. It's very crushing. He realized at that point that he was basically losing the tournament. It's essentially like that was the end of the tournament, that Aronian game. So I think we should cut him a little slack on that one. And then the last game, he's just desperately trying to make up ground, but Caruana had a great opening. It turned out it looked dead equal, but the attack on the queen side was impossible to pursue. Caruana thought he knew that. I was even thinking of showing that game today because of a question I got. A fascinating game. Both sides played very well. Nakamura had a chance to come back at the end, but it's so hard when you're really getting attacked and you don't have any attack yourself, even though what you've played for is an attack. So that's a great question, and I guess I'd say I think it's partially true. I think he pressed too much after he lost because he really wanted to win the whole thing. He's a very ambitious player. He's not trying to gain rating points. And excellent question. What do you think? You might give me another chat and say what you think was going on, what you think might have also been happening in that situation, or anybody else can throw in their questions. I got a question about who they think after round 8. Who do you think is going to win the candidates now? Having said, Nakamura was actually my favorite player, although all of them were about equal, and the other 2 I picked were Caruana and Aronian to be almost the same probability, and at least they're both still in it. I didn't pick Anand. What could I do? We keep not picking him, and he keeps doing well. So choosing a winner right now is actually, I'll answer that question for a second. You guys should feel free to throw in some more chats. I hope I'm still on the air. Someone might confirm that. So it's worth mentioning that Caruana and Karyakin and Aronian all have 3 whites and 2 blacks remaining. That's a small advantage, whereas Anand and Giri have 3 blacks. I'll lean towards Karyakin. He seems to be playing well. We don't know if he'll get nervous, way too nervous at the end. And also because he's in first place and because you just keep thinking Anand, my only issue with Anand, he's about as likely as anybody else. He's almost equally likely because he's tied for first and he's going to be calm. He has really nothing to lose. He's proven himself in the chess world and he has the experience. And he's played very well. It's not as though he got lucky to get to tied for first. He's gotten his points. He's deserved his points. And I think that's important too. If you've just been lucky to get there, where you go, well, he's been lucky. But the main reason to be pessimistic about Anand is he is really older. He's shown that in some of these tournaments that he gets tired, so he might tend to fade a little. And that extra black doesn't help him either, especially if he needs to win. That's hard to do as black. He's got very solid systems, but it's tough to win. I suspect that Aronian, even though he's right in the thick of it, normally I'd say him for sure because I think he's a genius, but he's going to have a hard time adjusting to that loss versus Anand. I think it's just going to be difficult for him. This has happened before to him in the candidates, Just losing games he probably shouldn't lose. I hope I'm wrong. I'd love to see him win. Geary is another half point down, and thus even a longer shot. But of course, he still has a chance because he's got a good score, and he hasn't lost. I predicted before the tournament, as pretty much did everybody else, that one problem is he draws too many games. And in fact, he hasn't won one so far. He hasn't lost one so far. So that turned out to be true. But before, I thought it would take +4 to win the tournament. Now that's not so clear. He could conceivably sneak into a tie, for example. So he's still in it, but a bit of a long shot at this point, just because there's so many people ahead of him. You know, the deal about being behind is that it's harder to catch up because there's several people in front of you, and that's true in any sport situation. If he was just, the number of points doesn't matter as much as the fact that he's got to leapfrog several people. So what are we doing here? He thinks he's overwound. Good. If you read any interview, Moscow is the only tournament that matters. Absolutely. I knew that too. I actually talked to him and to Sunil. On the other hand, that's pretty much the only tournament that matters to some of these other players, I think. Obviously not Anand. But what's Karyakin playing for in his career now? It's to get in. What's Aronian playing right now? It's to get in. So he says understandable but indicative of nerves. Absolutely. Nerves are so key here. Whoever, in a way, I think Spielman was saying, basically, whoever gets nervous, whoever doesn't, who holds his nerves wins the tournament, and whoever doesn't, falters at some point. He thinks they're very important. I think I agree. Maybe not quite as much as him. I think Caruana has shown that opening preparation matters, even though he lost his last game with opening. I mean, he should have lost his last game with opening preparation, and he barely survived. He's been the best prepared. He's also tried for the most, and that means he can win towards the end. So Caruana is my second favorite. I don't know if I said that, but right now Karyakin and Caruana are probably my two favorites, with Anand just barely behind. Easy to say, given their scores, right? But I think Caruana has been playing the right kind of chess to win this tournament. Also, if he gets to the last round needing a win, or if he notices that he needs a win by looking over at the next board, he's more capable of it at this point, of doing that. And he's held his nerve, for example, in that grossly lost position. He didn't collapse at all, fought really hard. I'm impressed with his play and his openings, especially. For quite some time, he's been the most prepared of all these incredibly overprepared players, and it's showing here. It hasn't changed for this, although Svidler, oddly enough, has been extremely well prepared. All right, what do we got? Anything else? Svidler's failure to convert winning positions is consistent with his self-doubting personality. I think that's true. I think it's true. I think he's failed in these positions before, so he's a little worried about, yeah, there's some nerves there and some questions. He's so well prepared and so strong. He's such a strong player. The problem is there's 8 incredibly strong players. Even Topalov, look, he's in last place, but he's capable of winning a tournament like this. He really is. I don't think it was inevitable that he wouldn't. I think what I said before the tournament was he's either going to go way down or way up. His motivation, everybody said, wasn't quite as strong as before, and he's getting older. But if he'd won a few games at the beginning, I think you could have seen him go all the way. So someone's got to be at the bottom, and there's always a reason. And of course, insecurity, especially once you lose a game or you don't win some winning positions. Nevertheless, I agree. I think Peter has that issue, and this is one of his last chances to get to the top. They're all thinking, how can I get that match? You might think, oh, they're scared of Carlsen, but it's totally irrelevant. They want that shot because they're all self-confident people. On one level, they're incredibly confident. Whether they're confident about winning a tournament like this is, of course, a different matter. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. I just don't think we should overrate it because everybody's insecure, and they happen to get some bad breaks maybe. Although in Svidler's case, yeah, he could have made his own tournament. That's not really true of Nakamura. He hasn't been in a position to do well. He's been in a position to hold on in some games. All right, anybody else got anything to say here? Because I can go back to the next 3 or 4 questions that I have here. I got a couple of questions about the Gruenfeld. The one that I got a long time ago was, can you please suggest a positional, solid, and less sharp line for white to counter the Gruenfeld? And a related question was, the Gruenfeld such a tough nut to crack, what do you think white's best chance is to defeat it? That's a harder question. So I'm going to concentrate on my original question, the positional, less sharp line recommendation. But regarding how to beat it, I was going to say that in a way depends on who you are and who the opponent is. Nakamura, I think just yesterday, said every normal opening, or two games ago, every normal opening is equal if black plays accurately. They all know this. There's no one's beating the Slav or the Queen's Gambit declined by force at the top levels, or the Gruenfeld, I don't think, if black plays accurately. So, or the Nimzo Indian or Queen's Indian. So if you want to pose maximum problems at the very top, that's just a question of who you're playing, style, and there's a number of possibilities for playing that. If you want to take someone who isn't a theory fanatic, I might go for a main line. For example, I'm not going to put up a game. Maybe I am going to put up a game. Let me do that. There's a couple games I was going to show here. Yeah, I don't know which one's better here. Let me put up this one. 68. See if I get something right for a change here. So the best efforts of, yeah, here it is. Okay, so what's the Gruenfeld? Okay, there are several ways to do it. If you're playing someone who's all booked up and you want to get what you say is a sharp, solid, and less line, and I'm going to show one of those. But first I'm going to talk more about the Gruenfeld and other lines. The line I'm going to show you, it can happen in two different ways. It's that line. I think it's a very practical line. I even think white might be slightly better, just very slightly better. And it's very hard to do that against the Gruenfeld. This can also come up, by the way, by playing the normal line here and then here. And really, black's not going to do much else except this. He's going to play c5 early, but he's going to play bishop g7 first. So that's the line I'm going to show. Now let's talk about doing something else. Okay, against someone who's not, you don't think is super well prepared, maybe a lower player and doesn't know everything, maybe just play the classical. It's not that hard. First of all, getting to this position is forced, so that's nice. You don't have to study a lot to get here. And then there's so many ways to play this, but one thing you can do is just play, well, for example, this move. You can play very safely with a move like this. Yeah, you can play one of these systems. They're very safe. They're pretty good. And either rook b1 or rook c1. Just look those up. Positional, Kramnik's line. Typical Kramnik plays safe things. What I wouldn't do is play into the classical main lines with here and knight here unless you've really, really studied it. And you may not get an advantage anyway because the moves for black can be pretty intuitive if you just know a few ways to get started. But there are other ways to play this. One thing you can do is go way back. This is kind of funny, but you can go way back to this move, which has the idea that after this you can push by and that check does not win the rook, and so you get tremendous play. That's the old line. For years the main line. And I think there's plenty even to be discovered here still. But if you played this, there's no way your opponent's going to know 20 moves of theory, which is what ultimately stopped people from playing it with these lengthy, lengthy theoretical lines. What else? Okay, so let's go back. Now, if your opponent is all booked up, I'm going to show you this bishop d2 stuff. But I was going to say there's other move orders you can try to get in. Well, there's all kinds of things you can do. Bishop g5 is popular right now, but there's also other move orders. Now that he doesn't have to play the Gruenfeld against a move order like this, but if he does play that kind of thing, then you can play this line, for example, and put your knight here. Very solid, possibly even slightly better for white, which is why black often avoids this. Now the drawback to that line is that black doesn't have to play d5. Black can play either King's Indian or even c5 or c6 and d5, which is what a lot of people do. But so you have to be ready for other moves. But those are very solid lines. White can play very solidly in those positions, which was the request. So even if you don't get your Gruenfeld, you can play very solidly. The other idea is don't play knight c3 and play g3 and get some position like this. And then again, here your knight's not on c3, so you can play here. That's a famous line. Black doesn't necessarily stand badly here, but it's a fun position to play. You get a center, it's very solid. You'll never be worse if you play well. You're not getting attacked. I mean, not too severely. You know, he is going to play for c5, but so what? It's a good practical line. So those are some answers. The one I'm going to show you, however, is this. And you can play knight f3 first, you can play it after taking, or you can play it after playing bishop d2, but you get to this position. And let me check my time. Okay, so that means not a lot of detail. Black can play c5 immediately, or can just castle, for example. If black castles, the idea of this line is get your rook to c1 as fast as possible. And then, for example, if black makes a move like that, which is often played to try and get that in, then you can switch to this kind of plan, takes, and play for the move c4 with tempo. And then you've got pressure this way, and bishop c4. If he grabs the pawn, you might even play here to play bishop c4, but also to play b5. Excellent position. So black probably is going to play this move c5. That's what's critical. And then now you have three good moves, actually. Well, two particularly good moves. That, well, not necessarily that good, but they're worth trying to play anyway. I'm sorry, not c5 immediately. c5 immediately you have takes and something like rook takes, and you've got a big center. My fault. Knight b6 would be the main move here. Thinking about c5 and thinking about knight c6. And you can go here now. That's a pretty good line. And then come back, which is the same thing as playing bishop f4, except this is hanging in some lines. Or even come this way. This is a very easy, nice position to play. You just play e3, get your pieces out. I think you can even be slightly better in this position. If black plays, I won't go into too much detail here. The other way you can play this that I think is interesting is just bishop here, covering that square and aiming at this. And here you have this idea. This is actually probably black's best way to play this, because if you play the rook takes, it turns out it's not that great. So you probably play pawn takes and let black get the pawn back, but play, actually this is a good move. Excuse me, what was it I wanted to play here? Yeah, not sure if I remember exactly how to do this. I think e4. Oh, wrong line. I'm in the wrong line here. I should be in the bishop f4 line. Oh, g3. That's right. So this is right. And these bishops are very strong down here, it turns out. So, for example, after it takes, I think you just play rook here. And I think white has an advantage here because he's got the two bishops, and they're good bishops. So I don't want to take too long on this. That was kind of a note to the game. There's a lot of other ways to play it. For example, yeah, that knight up move is quite good. You can even give away a pawn there. Maybe this is the main line, is c5. And as I say, you take this way. You don't leave the king in the center. You take this way. I was going to say an interesting line here after g3 is knight c3, rook d2. Trying to get the pawn out. Black and he's just worse unless he gets this pawn also, which is not completely unrealistic to try and win that pawn by going here and attacking it twice. And if white plays there, everything's going to come out for black. So what white does is just gives that up and plays bishop g2, I believe here. Yeah. And then he can't really take that way because that's going to end up winning a piece, I think. Yeah, oddly enough. Because if he takes it, you're taking this one, and the knight is trapped. And if not, you're on this multiple times. Just for example, is there any move here at all? Oh yeah, if you play there, there's this. So that's kind of cute. But I'm getting into details, but that doesn't matter because you'll want to look at this lecture again and maybe know a few of these details. So he has to take the other way. And then white just castles, and now rook here is happening. There's too much. Okay, sure, black's a pawn ahead, but white has everything. These guys are undeveloped, and my pieces can just march into the position. I have an immediate threat of playing doubling rooks, and that knight has nowhere really good to go. The bishops rake the queen side, and it just turns out this is a very nice position, not too surprisingly. All right, so that's a method of playing, and the other way to play this would be if black plays knight b6 immediately, which is the line recommended in some books and the choice of a lot of Gruenfeld experts, which is to say that in this position, so I'm giving you a repertoire here, which is kind of what was asked. Well, he was saying what line to play, but I don't think it's worth saying what line to play unless I explain it. Knight b6 is a big move here. and you're trying to. He's just trying to attack the this side of the board. And what I have is white playing here. Let me see. Is this right? Yeah, I want white to play this move now. He wants to play e3, but he wants to get in front of the pawn chain. And there's a whole bunch of moves here. I'm going to use up too much time, so let me just show you what I think black should do. I think black should castle rather than play c5. c5 is very similar to what we just looked at. You just take it. And in the end, black's going to have to take this to get his pawn back. And then white's going to have a very similar position. It's different analysis, but it's even better for white. White puts his knight on d4. So what he should do is castle to make white commit to something, and then play c5. A little more aggressive. And I still think white's a little better, but black has some options now that where he doesn't have to take here. He can just come back. And white can go here, threatening that kind of thing. And black can block him off, and white can play here. Now the problem is, in order to take that back, he has to give this up, and he doesn't have enough compensation. So this position also favors white, I think. Maybe not by a ton, but enough that it's worth playing. So I hope that answers that question. What if they play bishop g7 allowing? Okay, good question. What if they take on c3 instead of knight b6? Oh yeah, I don't think did we talk about that. Okay, let's go back. That's supposed to be good for the c3 question is quite relevant. For example, taking here now, you take with the bishop. That's why you play bishop d2. And this is yet another position, but I think white's favored here. You can see why. White has more space. It's a known line, but I think black usually tries to avoid this. This is something black's been not allowing to happen. And I guess I won't go into any more detail there. The other question was good too. It was to play bishop g7, allowing e4 and then knight c3. And that's also a main line, but what was I thinking there? Yeah, basically I wasn't even showing some of the most important lines because they're known to be good for white. Here, I was going to play a knight takes d5 line very early here, and let me see if I have notes on that. Yeah, that's a very good question. Ah, here it is, yeah. Well, no, it's not quite the same, sorry. Okay, I think we saw this position. The question is, are you going to play castles here? Yeah, it's a little, maybe a little different move order, the guy says. Yeah, because we kind of looked at this with the idea of playing c5. In this position, we looked at both c5 and castles. So you aren't playing e4, you're playing here. That's the answer to the question about waiting with bishop g7 so that after e4 you could play here. You really aren't playing e4 in these lines unless he gives you a whole extra tempo. I mean, if you did something like this, you'd be very happy to play e4 right away. But as long as he plays these moves like c5 or castles, then you're either taking or, and I think you can always avoid those e4 knight takes c3 lines. So I think that's the answer to that. And if he plays knight c3 early, that's a little bit cooperative. Okay, I hope that answered that. I'm actually not an expert at all on this bishop d2 line, but I was asked about something solid, and I looked at some lines that seemed pretty good. So hopefully that'll be of use anyway, even if it's not a complete answer. Obviously, you have to go look this up, do some research, but it's safe. So even if you don't do any research, if you play it right away, you're probably not going to get any serious trouble. Okay, so let me see. I have a Blackmar-Deemer question. I have an Albin counter-gambit question. The only problem with the Albin counter-gambit is so complicated. I don't know if I want to get started on that today. I also don't know where we are with respect to time. I'd like to do more of that Gruenfeld stuff because I have a lot of sublines on that. By the way, this bishop d2 line, I should say, has been played, or variants of it. You may recognize this from all kinds of GM games over the last 5 to 10 years. It never was played, it was hardly ever played in the early days. Played a lot in the last 5 to 10 years, so you might think it's well known, but I'm playing it in a kind of a unique way, whether you either take here. Did we look at that line? Maybe that's what I was going to show you because it's very important. I think there were two options at one point. Yeah, let me show you this. This was actually a game I didn't put up. Okay, yeah, the main, is it the main game? Excuse me, did I finish the main game? The main game went c5, which is a very popular move. Just trying to break down the center. One rule in the Gruenfeld is it's so simple. You play bishop g7, then you just play c5 as early as you can. in almost every variation. And this is the interesting thing, this variation, which is what makes it different. And then here, and I think this has been underrated. You know, you're thinking of just taking this, which would be wonderful structurally for one thing. And he can't take because the bishop's hanging. Rook takes. So the real question is, why can't he play queen a2, which is what he plays in the game? And then white takes that anyway with tempo, attacking here. And black defends that bishop and attacks the rook. White comes back, simply defending his pawn. And this position, you could argue, is just slightly better, maybe even considerably better for white. A little more than slightly, but not overwhelmingly. Because now you're thinking about bishop c4 with tempo. And this can move later, this pawn, with the attack. And that knight all of a sudden is not counterattacking in the center. So this position would naturally favor white, except that he can stop bishop c4 and get his pieces out and work on the queen side. That would be the only problem with it. But then we have a couple good moves. One is just play here. Bring the bishop out and get castled. It's a nice position. It's very active. Or, I think a little bit more accurate would be bishop d3 right away. And if he ever plays bishop g4, you don't care because he just doubles that. For example, something like this. Then you have two bishops. So the fact that it looks bad to have those doubled pawns isn't really the case. This favors white, this kind of position. Big center, extra center pawns, and also more connection here. And for example, no matter where he goes, you're probably going to play f4, stopping the move e5. You can transfer this onto the long diagonal where it's very strong. You have two bishops. You have bishop b4, and you can control the file for a while with your pieces. It's just a nice position. I'm not saying black's making the best moves here, by the way, but just to show you that those double pawns are not an issue. The last thing you can do is play what was played in the game, which was this, trying to stop black from castling. And black develops, and white has to take one of the bishops off, which is not totally ideal. On the other hand, I think white's still better. Black doesn't want rook c7 coming in, and he also can't castle because the bishop takes e7. So you can imagine that white's a little better here. And I don't know how much of this I'm going to show you. Might as well show you a little more. Here's how the game went. Very natural moves, all these things. That makes an escape square and might be useful anyway. So an interesting move. He's trying to maximize the power of all his pieces. The knight's ideally placed in the center. He's got two center pawns to one, and now he's attacking these squares. So even if black could equalize this position, which maybe he can, the point is that white has all the chances in this kind of position. That's a good move, of course, because if you take that, which he does, you're defending both vulnerable pawns. But he still has the two center pawns to none, and he lacks space. I don't know about that a6 move, but just because it weakens more squares. On the other hand, he makes those so that he can reorganize his pieces. You know, black has no weakie here. I don't know which of these moves are a mistake, because pretty soon white's better. He decides to play bishop, knight versus bishop. And the idea is to exploit these squares a little bit. And sort of, the bishop's sort of cut off. So to get the bishop activated, black feels he has to play that move. That also stops these nice aggressive moves. And but now the knight reorganizes. Okay, now these squares are kind of attended to, and this one. So there's this threat of, I guess, queen there attacking two pawns, but especially the d pawn, which can't be defended. So the knight's better than the bishop is the idea. Let's just finish it. It's kind of a fun game now that I look at it. Okay, so at least he stops the threat of winning that pawn. Some of this is just tacking back and forth because, you know, you have to make time control and things like that. Once again attacking this pawn, but okay, so this is interesting because right now black's in a bit of a quandary about where's he going to move all these pieces. This is not simple, and this could be a threat, and in fact he allows that. I wonder if now black should play a move like that. I'm not sure if the queen coming in is too dangerous because of these. Oh yeah, it looks pretty dangerous. That pawn is very weak. So that's why he didn't do that. So instead of that, he went back and allowed this weirdo sacrifice. It's not much of a sacrifice, is it? Because this guy's hanging. I think black's idea was, okay, I'll get queen versus queen, and that's not easy for white to win. So he takes it. Okay, so white is a pawn ahead, right? Not too, right, temporarily more, but he will be a pawn up. Unless white also takes this one. But then black's pawn and the queen side are going to be too strong. So this is very interesting. He's got the two passed pawns. Sometimes it doesn't matter if you're a pawn or two ahead if it's a queen ending, because the person whose pawns are fastest will win. That's sort of a little principle that doesn't apply all the time, but that's okay. So he just repeats, and then he decides to try to win. Checks a bunch. Okay, this is interesting because these pawns look just outrageously strong. But white's going to try and checkmate, make threats against black's king. I think if you look at the computer, all these positions are actually good for white, oddly enough. They don't look that good to me because you think that black could ignore white and just start pushing these pawns, or even give one of them up in order to get the other one further down. But you can put this on the computer. We'll just keep going. Once that F pawn gets going, then it's scary. And now the king itself is in trouble. In fact, he's getting mated. A cute little finish. Believe it or not, I think white was better that whole time, even though it may have looked a little bizarre. You see why it's a mate? It's a mate because he only has one square, and then check here, and then you can mate this way if you want to. So there's also, yeah. Anyway. Wow. Well, that was a fun game. Anybody enjoy that? What have we got here? Random thought. Should tag the archive streams with descriptions of the openings. That's a good idea. Okay, I'll try to remember to tell yeah, everybody knows who Sandro is. Include the ECO codes. That's another good idea. There's good Gruenfeld analysis here. Hopefully I didn't mess it up too much. And once again, apologies about are there any more chat questions? Because I think if I went to the Albin counter gambit right now, I would never finish. So are there any other questions now? If not, we'll finish off this show. I promise not to have the same technical problems next time. I'll probably have different ones, but no, seriously, this was the longest delay we ever had, and I appreciate anybody who stuck around watching. Yeah, you're getting an approval. John Hartman's suggestion is getting an approval. As long as he gives his real name, I might mention that John Hartman does wonderful reviews, book reviews for Chess Life, which are always worth reading, and in fact are some of the very few book reviews left in the world. There aren't that many book reviews going on, at least in English. And I would strongly suggest you read those. Most of you are Chess Life subscribers, and you can always borrow a copy. So if you want to know what to read in some detail, or maybe even what not to read, if his description makes you think maybe you don't want to read it, you can get a lot of information there. So thank you, everybody, and we'll try again next week. I just won't get stuck in the problem I was stuck in this week. We'll be fine with this. Thank you, everybody.